everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Kira Whalen, and I'm the B2B Marketing Coordinator here at Niche. I'll be handling the Q&A throughout the presentation, and any questions I can't get answered, I'll direct towards Will at the end. Before we get started, just want to say a quick reminder that tomorrow morning, you'll receive an email with a copy of the slides and a recording of today's presentation. And we'll also have this webinar available on our Enrollment Insights blog later today.
Okay, thank you, Kira. I just want to say thank you to everyone attending today. We're going to take a look at some of the data from the 2020 Niche Senior Survey. If you haven't read the white paper yet, there's no way we can get to everything that's in there today, but try and hit some of the points. I'm joined today, Kira Whalen, you already heard from. She's going to be organizing those questions. You can drop those into the chat box on the side. We'll take a look at who this modal student is and what that means. If you haven't read the survey yet, what students have to say about their experiences in considering colleges and where they want to enroll, and then what all that means for your enrollment planning. And then I'll leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A and your questions and comments. So you can submit those on the side. I can also share your takes online using the hashtag Enrollment Insights. You'll see that at the bottom of every slide. We do these monthly webinars because Niche is invested in information on your schedule. We really want to be a best-in-class partner, regardless of whether or not you're a partner with us yet. Our mission is to make researching and enrolling schools easy, transparent, and free. So just a little bit of housekeeping here. As Kira said, if you're just jumping on, the recording of this, the webinar, other resources are all available on the Enrollment Insights blog. You'll get an email in the morning with a link directly there. You can also find the blog and all the different contents there at niche.bz/insights. And you can access those anytime. Okay, so every summer here at Niche, we survey the newly minted high school grads. We're trying to gauge how their search process is changing over time, what they're confident about as they start college, and then what concerns they have. So we started asking a small version of this back in 2016 and made small tweaks and additions every year, as well as asking a topical question each year. So this year, of course, I think it's a no-brainer. Topical question was all about COVID. We also received just shy of 19,000 responses. We collected quite a few pieces of data to help us in segmenting and better understanding the experiences of students. And the full results online, there's interactive charts, so you can really dive down and learn more about your specific types of students. This year, we focused on trying to learn more about best practices and survey demographics as well. So we had a lot more options for gender identity, which was previously just called gender, and then race and ethnicity. The students could now respond as male, female, or gender non-binary, as well as other. So in the past, it had just been male or female. This opens up some more opportunities there. We also strove to improve the reporting of race and ethnicity by offering more granular options. So I took the advice of the Southeast Asia Resource Action Center's Everyone Deserves to Be Seen policy brief, among many other resources. So students can now report as a multi-selection of African American or Black, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Caucasian or White, Hispanic or Latinx, Middle Eastern or North African, or Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. So in addition to responding that they didn't know what their racial or ethnic background is, because not everyone may know. If they selected Asian, they were given 20 additional subgroups. And then if they selected Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, they could choose from 7 additional subgroups. So we're able to really dive deep and see the differences by specific types of students. They're also able to choose the type of high school and the location, which really differed if they were a domestic or an international student. They saw different options there. Parental education was expanded from simply whether or not they were a first-generation student to selecting the highest level of parental education. So the options there range from less than a high school diploma to a graduate or professional degree. Then we asked about GPA. They could choose from anywhere between less than a 2.0 all the way up to 4.0 and above by 0.5 increments. Household income was broken down to the most recent US quintiles. We did ask about test score data and put those into quintiles, but it's not added into the filters because we found that just really, really closely correlated to the household income. So essentially we already have that. So for those who stated that they were enrolling in college this fall, we also asked, we asked up front, have you decided where you want to enroll? and then gave them the option of saying they chose to take time off and not enroll this fall, or they had chosen not to enroll at all. And then we asked what type of college they were enrolling at if they had decided to. If they hadn't, we asked them why not. So lots there. That's a mouthful to get started with. One of the things that I really like that we add in, we look at something called the modal student, and we evaluate what their concerns are and what their experience was. So rather than just look at an average student who might not exist all that often, you just have this amalgamation of averages. When you hear that the average household is 1.5 children, you're not going to find any households with 1.5 children. So instead, we look at the most frequent, or the modal. To do that, we looked at 5 demographic markers, and then we identified the most frequent combination. What was the most common to be actually found when you walk onto campus? So for the first 4 years, 2016 through 19, it came out to being the same student. We have here a female student, Caucasian or white, suburban public high school, parents are college grads, from a household earning between 75 and 150,000. But this year, this student became the second most common for the first time. So this year's modal student really only retained their gender identity and that they went to a public high school. The changes in the parental education and the income really signal some major shifts that I think need to be made in communications and services for students. So as you're talking to your students, before you even get to know them, before you know anything about them, you need to think about how to make your language accessible to both the students and the parents, as more may be coming in needing to know how to navigate the system. When we found here, most of their the modal student, her parents did not graduate high school. So how do you talk differently when that's becoming more common? The affordability messaging and then removing barriers of all these acronyms and our jargon should be goals this year if they haven't been already. This was our first year asking about the number of inquiry forms that students filled out on the website, so we don't have any comparison data yet. We did see that most students filled out 3 or fewer, so this should really help highlight the importance of quickly following up with a meaningful response to students who came to your site to fill out the inquiry form. They're taking the time to go to your site, fill out a form, ask for information. They should get more than an autoresponder and a canned email telling them to apply now. They didn't request information to be told to apply. Low-income students were the most likely to fill out an inquiry form, while students from the wealthiest families were the least likely to fill out an inquiry form. So that was interesting, not what I would have expected. It's also interesting to see that students who chose not to enroll at all this fall were still likely to fill out inquiry forms. So it's not like they weren't engaged. These students were engaged in the process, but ultimately in the end, they either chose not to enroll because of factors going on or were just unable to. The percentage of students not visiting any campuses this year had been slowly rising throughout the survey, but then more than doubled between 2019 and 2020. And then we've tripled since 2017. In the end, we see an increase of students taking 2 or fewer visits and a decrease in students taking 3 or more. So, on the college side, visits have always been a strong indicator of someone's intent to enroll, right? How likely they are to actually come to your campus is a good indicator of how likely they are to be very interested in enrolling in the fall. So make sure that your SEO, your search engine optimization, your website, and all around just your virtual presence provides a strong indicator about what life is like as a student. That's where the students will find you first and engage, especially since it's becoming less likely that you're going to get them on campus. That's something you need to think about, what they see and what they hear everywhere. Your virtual events should really take advantage of the platforms that you're hosting them on and not just try to duplicate your on-campus events. You need to play to where you're hosting them, whether that's streaming on YouTube, doing something for parents on Facebook, doing Instagram Live, or other specialty platforms. You need to take advantage of why are students already there, what are their expectations, and that's how you're going to get that engagement still. This year, we still see that household income is the biggest factor in the inequality of visits. The lowest income students are still around 3 times as likely to not visit any colleges as the highest income students. However, that scale changed from last year, where it was 10% and 3%. It's now 21% and 7%. So 21% of our lowest quintile students did not visit any colleges at all. A change that was not expected at all for me, at least, was the disparity between students attending a public and a private high school. Public high school students, this year at least, were twice as likely to report not taking a visit as their peers at private high schools. And private high school students visited more campuses this year than they did last, even in spite of the pandemic. So last year we saw no difference at all. This year we saw public high school students twice as likely to not visit. Very strange, not sure why that would happen in the middle of a pandemic, but something to monitor and something to watch. This year we also continue to see an increase in the students only applying to one college. So as we've seen in the past, the students who attend rural high schools also applied to the fewest college. So they're either very, very focused or unsure of other options, with more than 20% only applying to one college. In contrast, 13.6% of suburban high school students and 12.6% of urban high school students only applied to one high school. So there's a pretty big jump there. The median applications remained at 5 for everybody. So there's just no major shift there over the course of the survey in terms of how many. We're just seeing minor shifts along the way here. The number of acceptances per student hasn't shown any trend over the course of the survey. There's been some growth at both the single acceptances and the 5 or more, but we aren't seeing the kind of wholesale shift that we do in visits. Half of the students earn between 1 and 3 acceptances, so there hasn't been any kind of steep increase that'll be driving down yields or anything. When we looked at the effects of COVID-19, almost half of students said that their decision was altered by COVID. So back in March and April, we surveyed 36,000 seniors, and 44% said that they were reconsidering their college choices at that time. We also had 38% say they were considering staying closer to home. That's something that we saw play out then at the end of the year here. We also saw that COVID-19 affected more low-income students as well. They were 50% more likely than their wealthy peers to plan to stay closer to home. From prior surveys, we saw students, when we asked for their free response feedback, saying that they needed to stay at home now, help take care of their family, supplement incomes. They had younger brothers or sisters that they had to help care for. Initially, 69% of students said that they rely on college search platforms, on student reviews in making their decisions, but due to COVID, 18% more relied on them than they had previously. In addition to their general experiences and what they're confident about, we also asked students what issues they're having during the search and enrollment process. The goal there is to help provide feedback to colleges and to counselors and help remove some of these barriers. The biggest issue that students reported this year was in the limiting of visits. The 3 most common challenges here are all things that have a financial aspect to them. And we see that repeated throughout as a challenge and a concern for students. One new question this year, and we already had over a third of students respond that they did see it as an issue, was that of standardized testing. We had 37% say that they found it to be a burden in the college search and enrollment process. Another question we asked was about the college counseling support for students. So how are they getting support in their college search? Is it from parents, friends and family, siblings, at their school, things like that? We asked about, only 14.3% of students so they don't have a counselor support at all, or their counselors were unable to support them. That's still an increase from 11% last year. So more students said that they either had no support or their counselors were just unable to help them. We all know that school counselors are underfunded. There's just not enough of them for the students and for the number of things they're asked to do. And we're seeing that played out and how it's affecting students. Students attending rural high schools were the least likely overall to report they had a counselor at their school supporting their college search. They were the most often to say that their school counselors also handled college counseling, so they're being pulled in multiple directions. We heard from students at urban high schools, they were the most likely to report having a dedicated college counselor. So someone whose only focus is in helping students with their college search. They were twice as likely as their rural peers to have that kind of support. When we break it down, look at the simplified racial and ethnic groups, so we didn't break this out into all the subgroups, we did see that Caucasian students and those who did not know their background were the least likely to report having a counselor support them. That was not what I was expecting. Surprisingly, Caucasian students were 2/3 as likely as other students to report having a dedicated college counselor at their high school. They were, however, the most likely to report receiving support from their parents, and the third most likely to hire an independent counselor, behind Asian students and Middle Eastern and North African students. There's a lot of there's a lot here in this chart. I'll just touch on a few things. There's a lot of things here that can help you in increasing student success. The students were the most confident that college will prepare them for success and that they'll be able to get a job after graduating and that they'll be able to graduate on time. The first two there, confidence that college will prepare them for success and that they'll get a job after college, actually went up from last year. So that speaks very well. None of these questions received the majority of students, though, reporting they strongly agreed, that they strongly were confident. So there's definitely still some work to be done. Students and their families should be able to hear early and often about how your institution will support them. They really need that how, not just your placement stats, your graduation rates. That only gives them some numbers to look at. That's not telling them how do you do that. So what programs do you have in place? What engagement and opportunities do they have with faculty? Don't say that you have small classes and personal attention for faculty. Everybody claims that, even when we know it's not true. So focus on the special programs and the opportunities that help anyone succeed. In the past, we've also asked students if they feel prepared for college. Student confidence had been declining over the prior 3 years to just under 80%, saying that they were confident, that they were prepared. This year we split that question into two for some clarity. Do you feel academically prepared for college? And do you feel socially prepared for college? I'm really glad that we did that because we see academic preparation fall to 78.6%, not a steep decline, but social preparation was only 62.8%, saying that they were confident. And only 20% of students said that they strongly agree that they feel confident that they are socially prepared for college. When we broke out a few different ways, looking at students who reported as gender non-binary, that falls to 54%, saying that they feel socially prepared for college. And that students enrolling at four-year public colleges feel less prepared than their peers at four-year private institutions. So look to your orientation, your transition programs, and then early interventions to make students feel more connected and more supported. Advocate for mental health and support services on campus. Your students are saying they need it. If we can get ahead of this, you'll have less issues once they get to campus. It's something that can really help your retention as well. The biggest issue, again, though, this year was student confidence that they could afford the college at which they had chosen to enroll. And I really want to emphasize that because it's not just a generic, is college affordable question. We specifically asked, are you confident that you can afford the college at which you are enrolling this fall? And when we asked that, only 7.8% of students strongly agreed. That's a huge issue. Since this is where they have chosen to enroll, this is something that we should expect high results. They're enrolling at school. They picked this out of all their options. They should be confident that they can actually afford this. This has been a concern every year, though. The minority of students feel that they're confident. In fact, it's been steadily decreasing, going from nearly half to now less than a third. Even when we just break it down, so looking at students who have a 4.0 and above, coming from the wealthiest families, it only rises to 59% confident they can afford that college. Only 25% of both low-income and first-generation students feel that they can afford the college they've chosen. That's a huge issue. These are two groups who face a lot of challenges already. There's a lot that is weighing on them. They're more likely to be working full-time while enrolled. So this is something that is adding extra burden and extra stress. Even if the students can afford it and simply lack that confidence or they're just anxious about it, that's concerning. Student anxiety about affording college is not going to help them succeed. It's not going to help more students feel inspired to enroll. So work with students to help them see pathways to affordability. Even if they're saying they have no questions when you're talking to them, share that information, share the resources anyway. They might just feel like they can't speak about it, they can't ask questions, they can't reach out. So make them feel comfortable asking and give them the information even if they're not asking for it. This is one issue that could be tied to that drop in confidence. Students had been taking fewer loans over the course of the survey, but that trend reversed this year in a big way. For the first time in 5 years, the majority of students reported that they plan to take out a loan their first year of college. This could be influenced by loss of employment for them and their parents, drawing down of savings, or any number of other issues related to the pandemic. On our previous COVID-19 survey, we asked parents about the effect that it was having on them. In that survey, 57% of parents reported they'd be less able to help provide financial support for their child's college education. That was back in the spring. A lot's happened since then. Situations could have gotten even worse for families. There's a comment from a student that has always stuck in my head here. They said that in 1 week's time, every adult in their family had lost their job. That is just a huge burden and a huge stress for that student and for that family. I can't imagine what they've been going through and whether or not they were deciding that they were going to enroll or not, because you don't know how that's going to play out. We did see a spike this year in the share of students removing colleges from consideration entirely, based only on the published tuition and fees. And for the first time, we saw that at every income bracket. In the past, it was just a minority of students at the top income tiers, but this year, even they were eliminating colleges due to cost of applying above 50%. So for colleges who continue to increase tuition, increase discounting, that's just not sustainable. You can't show students how generous your financial aid is if they don't apply. I expect more colleges to consider tuition resets or move to true cost models that some colleges are already using. You don't go into a store, pick up a can of corn, and then expect to pay half of that when you get to the register. It's a very different model that we've been using. On the college side, we view visits as this crucial engagement point, right? Only 2/3 of students, though, say that a visit is important to their decision. That was significantly more than those who said that virtual tours and events were important. But the good news here is that both were satisfying experiences to students, and only slightly more reported that virtual tours were dissatisfying. So that means that we have a lot of room to improve here. It's not like students were saying, hey, we don't like these events. They're still satisfied with it. There's just room to improve. Since fewer students are taking visits at all, taking fewer visits overall, a positive experience is going to be more important. So more important than that even might be having an accessible experience. So make sure that your visit experiences and your culture are going to be something they can experience from their phone or their laptop. If you have documents or other content that students only receive when they come to campus, you have that special piece they get, special tidbits, something like that. Make sure they can receive it virtually. There's students who just will not be able to visit, so don't withhold valuable pieces of information or opportunities. If your institution says that they're mission-driven to serve the most vulnerable students, or just want to be a more diverse institution, it's really hard to argue that requiring standardized tests for admissions or scholarships is going to help you. Significant numbers of students shared that tests were a burden and that test optional policies were important in their decision. And now that the majority of colleges are test optional or blind, it's going to be interesting to watch how interest in the colleges that still require test scores changes. There were 3 types of students that are targeted to increase diversity on many campuses. So we broke down those results here. All of them reported higher rates for these 2 questions. We saw, in the paper, you can get the full results, but we saw a very strong correlation between test scores and family wealth. There's nothing to say that it's predictive of actual ability, just ability to pay. There's a lot here. I'm not sure what screens you're watching this on, so it might be better. All the slides will be up with the recording on the website. So you can see these. This is also in the white paper. These are all the factors that students weighed in on while deciding where to apply. So the major and program are the most important feature to students, and that's good news. They're focused on that outcome at least. The only other metric that the majority of students said was very important was financial aid and scholarship information. Safety was their third most important piece, but one that I've rarely, if ever, seen covered early in inquiry and prospect communications. So if there are safety issues on campus, I hope this is something that you can take these results and expedite solutions and investments. What was really interesting for me, at least, is that athletics was ranked as the least important consideration. More students care about the opportunities in the arts when considering where to apply. But how often are the arts highlighted in view books and in Conflows, right? You're much more likely to see photos of the football and basketball teams alone, not to mention all the other athletic opportunities. The most important resources when we look at relationships and people, on the recommendation side, were their teachers and then other students. Further down the list, we see families, college reps, and then finally their school counselors. So don't forget to build relationships with teachers and to make sure that your students can be advocates for your institution through, they can have have them fill out reviews on different sites, have them share their student stories on social, on YouTube, other video platforms. That's what students want to see the most. They want to hear from, where do my teachers think are good colleges, and what are other students saying their experiences? Okay, there's a lot there. We covered just a small portion of what's all available in the full white paper. You can find that at niche.bz/insights. I'll turn things over here to Kira to help with your questions. You can continue dropping those questions into the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Okay, well, so the first question we had earlier in the deck, you mentioned the campus visit number. Did that include just in-person visits, or did that also include the virtual events?
Yep, that was just on-campus visits.
Great, thanks.
I should mention too, feel free to reach out to me later if you have questions pop up. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. You see all my contact info there.
We have another question. Will, do you have any tips for creating virtual visits that are engaging to prospective students?
Yeah, I think it has to start with, there's a couple of routes you can go. You can go with think of it as a visit day still, in which case there's a survey right now that I'm running talking, we're looking at what do students want in their virtual events, virtual visits, things like that. One of the early results is that they want a mixture of live and recorded sessions. There was something I wanted to do a few years ago, and I hope someone will take this and run with it. But instead of having, you have these set days for your virtual, your on-campus events back then, having essentially a landing page where students could almost a la carte their experience. You have, if you want to see some sort of intro from the dean of whichever colleges, you can have those pre-recorded. You can have a mixture of live streaming sessions at different times. Maybe it's every Wednesday night we have a live stream with faculty in X department, or we have students every day at this time. Just basically a hub where students can get the live content, but they can come anytime and sort of a la carte their way through a visit opportunity. That's sort of thinking of things as a traditional. Students really want to hear from faculty, from current students, and from, I don't remember the survey now, and from admission staff. They want those contacts. They don't really care about, your college president coming in giving a hello, everybody. So that's something that have the opportunity, to do like live AMAs or Q&As with students. They really want that. Maybe you have a, you know, something with an admissions counselor where you're centered on a single topic. They can either submit questions in advance or live. Those are ways that you can get some engagement there. If you think of it less as a standard event and more of just engagement and storytelling, there's a lot of great stuff being done with Instagram Live, with engaging bits on Reels and TikTok, whatever TikTok's going to wind up looking like. You can do YouTube streaming events. There's a lot of things where you can do just one-off info sessions or student storytelling roundtables, things like that. You don't have to think of it as okay, we have once a month, we have this big visit event. Think of engagement as every day. What's something small we can do today to help engage with students?
We've had 2 more questions come in. The first one, Will, is have you heard anything about the cost of college application fees going down or increasing fee waiver options? It seems that is a primary concern with low-income students. So have you heard discussion about lowering those fees?
Yeah. Surprisingly, I have not. It's something that should be in place. Personally, I've never understood the concept of having someone pay for the honor of paying to go to school there. I'm a big advocate of free applications in general, because if you put up that barrier that they have to request a fee waiver, they have to raise their hand and say, hey, we're low income. And there's a stigma to that. Students may worry, well, is that going to make it harder for me to get in then? So if you just don't require that application fee in the first place, you're serving the students the best way you can.
And another question, so for private school students, they had visited more colleges this year than in previous years. Do you believe that means that they visited colleges earlier in the process and were able to get more visits done before COVID really hit?
I sure hope so. I hope that they weren't trying to take visits. I know of very, very, very few campuses that were open in March, April, May. That's not, I don't know how they would, I can come up with scenarios, but yeah, I think it just means that for whatever reason, they really front loaded this year and we're visiting more campuses. Or the other scenario is that public school students were more likely to be visiting in March, April, May and weren't able to this year. And that's why fewer did. I think it could really go either way, though I think it's probably more likely that public school students just typically visited later. They were waiting till March and then March visits couldn't happen.
Another question is, some schools have been adding alumni to virtual events, including alumni panels with current students. Can you think of any other virtual engagement opportunities where you would recommend reaching out to alumni for participation?
Probably more of interest to parents. In the survey we're running now, that's one of the options for students, and that's the least important, least interesting to them, is having alumni. Now, if that alumni is, some big name person that is going to draw a crowd, sure. But if it's Bob, who's a 2007 grad who, now works as a mid-level manager somewhere, probably not going to be of value to students. Not saying that's not a great job. There's a lot of us in those roles, but that's not what students are looking for. As far as alumni engagement, I think with parents, maybe it's something that we did see in the survey that students attending private high schools really valued the alumni network. So maybe you have a private high school event where you tie in alumni to talk about the effect of the alumni network on their experiences, connecting in their parents, the counselors at those schools, independent education consultants, things like that.
So do you have an idea, Will, on how students and families feel about income share agreements or loan forgiveness programs?
Have not asked about that. That's something that we can certainly add in the future, but it's not one that I've asked about. So.
Okay, I'll give it another minute for any other questions to come in. While we're waiting to see if any more questions come in, I just wanted to remind everyone that we'll be sending out an email tomorrow morning with a copy of these slides and a recording of today's presentation. And it will also be available shortly on our Enrollment Insights blog later today.
Yep, along with all the slides, then a link back to the white paper if you haven't seen that yet. We'll make sure that everything's there easy for you.